The hall was never meant for humans. It was built tall and wide, with smooth black floors that reflected light like still water. The air felt heavier than Earth air, pressing slightly on the chest. Rows of alien officials sat in curved seats, their faces calm but distant. At the center of the hall, a raised platform held a medical chamber made of clear, crystal-like material. Inside it lay the alien princess. She was young by her people's standards. It already carried the weight of an entire future. Her skin had lost its soft glow, and the gentle rise and fall of her chest had slowed to an uneven rhythm. Thin lines of light from medical devices wrapped around her body, pulsing in weak patterns. Every healer in the room knew the truth, even if none dared to say it out loud yet. She was dying. Humans had been invited to observe this gathering only because Earth had recently joined a fragile alliance. They were not expected to speak. They were not expected to matter. The man stood near the back with the other human delegates, wearing a plain uniform with no marks of rank. He was not a leader, not a soldier of importance, and not someone anyone would remember after the day ended. He had come because someone needed to. Because when the request arrived asking for volunteers to attend, he did not refuse. He had always been like that, quiet, present, never the first choice, but never absent when things were difficult. A senior healer stepped forward, their voice echoing across the hall in a calm, practiced tone. They explained that the princess suffered from a rare blood failure unique to her royal line. Machines could slow it, treatments could delay it, but only living blood could save her now. Not just any blood. Blood with adaptive properties strong enough to survive the transfer between species. Pause followed. Long. Heavy. The healer admitted that no donor among their own people matched the requirement. The room shifted uneasily. Officials exchanged glances. Guards tightened their stance. This was not how the day was meant to go. The human man felt something twist inside his chest. He did not fully understand the science, but he understood the meaning behind the silence. If no one stepped forward, the princess would not survive the cycle. Another healer spoke, softer this time, almost reluctant. They mentioned that preliminary scans done weeks earlier on visiting species had revealed something unusual. One human blood sample had shown rare adaptive markers. At the time, it was noted and archived, nothing more. The man felt his pulse quicken. He remembered the scan. A routine health check when he first arrived. The slight delay. The quiet whisper between technicians. No explanation given. He had not thought about it again. The healer's eyes lifted, scanning the human section. The room seemed to narrow, the air growing thicker with each second. The man knew, before anyone pointed, before any device confirmed it. He knew. He stepped forward. The sound of his boots against the floor echoed far louder than it should have. Heads turned. Some in surprise. Some in disbelief. A few in clear disapproval. He raised his hand. Not dramatically, not boldly. Just enough to be seen. The translators hummed as his words carried through the hall. He said he was willing to be tested again. He said he was willing to help if he could. A ripple moved through the crowd. Humans beside him whispered urgently, trying to pull him back. One warned him that cross-species blood transfer had never been done safely. Another reminded him that volunteers were not being requested. He did not answer them. His eyes stayed on the chamber at the center of the room. On the still form inside it, the healers hesitated. The council whispered among themselves. This was not procedure. This was risk. This was a human offering, something no one had demanded. Permission was granted only for further testing. Nothing more. He was escorted from the hall into a white-lit medical wing that smelled sharp and clean. The doors sealed behind him with a low hum. Devices scanned his body from head to toe. Blood was drawn, analyzed, tested, and tested again. Time passed strangely there. Minutes felt like hours. He sat alone on a narrow bench, staring at his hands. He thought about home. About small, ordinary things. Morning light through a window. The sound of traffic. A cup of tea cooling on a table. A healer returned. Their expression, unreadable, The results confirmed it. His blood was compatible. Not just compatible. Ideal, the healer explained the risks in simple terms. His blood could stabilize the princess, but the transfer would be deep. More than a donation. His body might react unpredictably. There could be lasting damage. There could be changes. There was no data to promise safety. He listened quietly. Asked one question. Would she live? The healer said yes. With high probability, that was enough. He signed the consent form without shaking hands. The device recorded his biometric agreement. No ceremony followed. No applause. Just a silent understanding that something serious was about to happen. When he was brought back into the hall, the atmosphere had changed. The princess's condition had worsened during the delay. The glow around her had dimmed further. Alarms chimed softly, carefully controlled so as not to cause panic. The council was informed of the results. Voices rose. Arguments followed. Some called it reckless. Others called it impossible. One elder spoke of ancient warnings against mixing life essence between worlds. The human stood still as the debate continued over his head. Around him, about him, but never truly with him. Finally, the princess stirred. It was subtle at first. A slight movement of her fingers. A shallow breath drawn deeper than before. The room froze. All attention shifted to the chamber. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused, then clear. She spoke weakly. Her voice carried by the translator in soft tones. She asked why everyone looked afraid. A healer explained the situation carefully. That a human had offered his blood. That it might save her. That it carried risks. Her gaze moved past them, settling on the man. They looked at each other for the first time. There was no fear in her expression. Only curiosity. And something else. Recognition, perhaps. Or understanding that went deeper than words. She said the transfer should proceed, the council protested. The healers hesitated. She repeated herself, stronger this time. The human nodded once, as if to say he agreed. As if his choice had never been in doubt. Preparations began immediately. The medical chamber was adjusted. Tubes and conduits were prepared, designed to filter and translate blood at the most basic level. Even then, no one could be certain it would work. As he lay down on the adjacent platform, the cold surface pressed against his back. A clear shield lowered above him. He felt a brief sting as the needle entered his arm. Then warmth as his blood began to flow. Across from him, the princess's vitals flickered at first. Nothing happened. Then the lights changed. The glow around her body strengthened. Shifting into patterns the healers had never recorded before. Her breathing steadied. Color returned slowly to her skin. At the same time, the man felt a deep pull inside his chest, like something being gently but firmly drawn out of him. Not pain exactly. More like pressure. Like standing too close to the edge of something vast. He clenched his jaw and stayed. Silent, no one noticed at first. All eyes were on the princess, and that was how part one of his fate began. Not with a declaration, not with heroism, but with a quiet step forward and blood flowing where it had never flowed before. The flow of blood was steady now. The room felt alive with quiet tension. Every official, every healer, every guard, and every human present was focused on the two bodies, connected by the tubes. The human man could feel warmth spreading through him in ways he could not explain. It was not just his blood moving into her. It was like a shared rhythm, a pulse he had never felt before. He looked across at the princess. Her eyes were half open, and a faint color returned to her cheeks. She gave a weak smile, and he nodded slightly. He did not speak. Words would have been useless. Actions carried meaning now. The healers monitored her vitals carefully. Each device beeped with data that was being read and interpreted in real time. Her breathing was stabilizing, and her heartbeat had become steady for the first time in days. The human felt a faint strain in his chest but dismissed it. He had known there would be pain or discomfort, but he had not expected this intimate. Almost electric connection. A senior healer approached him, speaking softly but with urgency. "You are experiencing side effects of the transfer. This is normal, but be prepared for changes. Your body is adjusting in ways we cannot fully predict." He nodded. He had expected the warning. He had expected anything. What he had not expected was how personal it felt. It was not just science. It was intimacy in a way he had never known. A shared survival between two beings who could never speak the same language. Time passed slowly. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. He noticed small details he would have missed before. The hum of the machines. The slight scent of the antiseptic air. The subtle tremor of her fingers as they moved ever so slightly. All of it became part of his world in that moment. The healers were cautiously optimistic. Her vitals were stable, but the energy readings were unusual. They were beyond what their technology could fully measure or explain. His blood was not only supporting her life, it was interacting with her biology in a way that suggested a deeper bond. One of the alien officials spoke quietly to a colleague. "It is unprecedented. The human's blood carries traits that we thought existed only in our own kind. He is changing her on a fundamental level." The human overheard the words but did not flinch. He did not care about recognition or warnings. All he cared about was her life. He could feel it, almost tangibly, as if part of her had become a part of him. Suddenly, she stirred more noticeably. Her eyes opened wider, her gaze searching. She spoke in a language he did not understand, but the translator rendered it into soft words that he could hear. "Who are you?" He smiled faintly. "Someone who wanted to help." Her expression softened. It was a mix of relief, curiosity, and something deeper, something like recognition or understanding. He could not put a word to it, but it was there. Bridging the impossible gap between species, a healer approached him again, a little more insistently this time. "Your body is showing signs of strain. We need to monitor you closely. This transfer is more intense than expected. There are risks, but the process should continue." He nodded again, silently agreeing. His focus was entirely on the princess. He felt a strange pull in his chest, a sensation he had never experienced. It was not pain exactly, but a deep pressure, like the weight of responsibility had become a physical force. His vision blurred slightly, but he did not falter. Hours seemed to pass. The room faded around him. The voices of officials and whispers of the healers became background noise. The only reality was the connection, the flow of life from him to her, and the subtle pushback he felt as his own body adapted to the shared pulse. At one point, a healer's assistant leaned close, eyes wide with concern. "We need to know if you can continue. The strain is growing. You may experience irreversible changes." He paused, feeling the pressure build, the energy shift. Then he spoke calmly, without hesitation. "She is worth it. Continue." The assistant hesitated but obeyed, returning to their station. He could feel the slight shift in the tubes, the subtle flow of life moving more fluidly now. She was stronger, steadier, more alive with each passing moment. Despite the success, an unfamiliar feeling settled in him. It was neither fear nor regret, but a quiet awareness that things would never be the same. He felt connected to her in ways he could not fully understand. His thoughts occasionally drifted to his own life, family, home, ordinary routines, but they seemed distant now, like echoes from another world. She spoke again, her voice weak, but clearer. "You are human." "Yes," he replied. She tilted her head slightly, as if trying to measure the significance of that fact. Then, almost imperceptibly, she nodded. The room remained tense. Officials whispered, debated, some silently observing while others whispered concerns about protocol and risk. Yet none could deny the evidence. The transfer was working. It was working in ways no one had anticipated. He continued to feel the subtle changes in his own body. Strength ebbed and flowed unpredictably. Certain sensations came more vividly, light, sound, and even tastes felt sharper. His heartbeat sometimes skipped, but the pressure in his chest reminded him of the connection they shared. The healer approached with a device that projected holographic readouts. They explained that his blood had adapted in real time, forming a bond with her immune system. "It is remarkable," they said quietly. "Your body is creating protective antibodies, not only supporting her, but learning from her biology. This is not simply donation. It is symbiosis." The word struck him, but he did not respond. He only looked at her, noting the faint color in her skin, the steadiness in her breathing, the slow rise and fall of her chest that marked life. He felt a swell of relief and determination. She moved slightly, reaching one hand toward him through the transparent barrier. He leaned forward, placing his hand where hers hovered, unable to touch directly but feeling the energy between them. It was subtle, electric, real. Hours passed more fluidly now. He lost track of time. The connection pulsed with life, sometimes ebbing, sometimes surging. He could feel it, shared heartbeat that belonged to neither of them alone. The healers occasionally checked on him, measuring vitals, watching for faint irregularities. The strain was real, but he endured it without complaint. He understood now that his role was not to ask questions or fear the unknown. His choice had created this moment, and he would see it through. At one point, she spoke again. "Why are you doing this?" He looked into her eyes. "Because you matter. Because this is the right thing." She blinked slowly, then exhaled, as if releasing the last of her fear. The room felt lighter, though no one spoke. The data confirmed what they could already see: the transfer was succeeding. As the session continued, subtle shifts occurred. He noticed changes in his own reflection in the polished floor. Slight, almost imperceptible marks on his skin, a faint shimmer in his eyes. He felt stronger in some ways, weaker in others, but never completely himself. He did not mind. He did not have time for fear or doubt. Only focus. Night fell, though the hall's artificial lighting made it hard to distinguish. He continued, keeping the rhythm steady, trusting the process. She continued to recover, her strength returning slowly but surely. Each breath was a victory. Each pulse a testament to their shared determination. The healers finally allowed a brief pause. Devices remained connected, but flow slowed slightly. He rested, though rest was difficult. The awareness of their bond lingered in every nerve, every beat of his heart. She smiled weakly at him again, lips barely moving. "Thank you," he nodded. "You don't need to thank me. Just live." Her eyes glimmered, an emotion beyond words crossing her face. Relief, gratitude, and something deeper. Perhaps recognition of the bond that had formed in the quiet. Intensity of shared survival. The human knew this was only the beginning. The transfer had worked, but there would be consequences. Changes he could not yet imagine. Still, as he watched her rise slightly, steady and alive, he felt a quiet pride. It was not heroism or fame. It was simply the right choice made when no one else dared. Part 2 ended with the room quieter than before. The connection remained deep and unbroken. The princess was alive, and he had endured the first test. But both knew that this bond, now established, would shape their futures in ways no one could yet predict. After the initial transfer, the human felt an unfamiliar weight pressing on him, not just physically, but deep inside. It was as if a part of him had moved into another being, leaving a hollow echo behind. He tried to ignore it, focusing instead on the small movements of the princess, whose chest now rose steadily with life. Each breath she took was a small victory. Yet every step forward also reminded him that this bond came with a cost. The healers monitored them constantly. They observed the princess's recovery with careful relief, noting the strength returning to her body. At the same time, they observed subtle changes in the human. His pulse fluctuated in patterns that the machines had never recorded. The senior healer spoke to a council of officials quietly, mentioning that his blood had created a link that went beyond a simple medical transfer. It was more than life support. It was an intertwining of life forces. The human could feel the changes. Strength sometimes left him in sudden waves, replaced by strange surges of energy. Sounds became sharper, colors brighter. Even the textures of surfaces seemed different. He was aware of every movement the princess made, as if her body and his had learned to move in tandem. a silent communication without words. The council met to discuss what had happened. Some members were concerned, warning that the human was now a variable they could not control. Others argued that he had saved a royal life and should be honored. Debate was long, tense, and filled with whispered fears about what could happen if he left. Yet the princess herself, who had been resting quietly, insisted that he remain at her side. Her voice, calm and unwavering, carried weight no council could ignore. The human was escorted to a private room next to the princess's chamber, where he could rest and recover. Even in rest, the connection was present. He could feel her heart, steady and strong, like a soft echo through his own body. The pressure in his chest never fully left, constant reminder that his life and hers were now tied together. He thought about what had brought him here. The quiet life he had known before seemed like a distant memory. Earth, its streets, the smell of rain, and the sounds of everyday lifefall were part of a world that now felt unreachable. He had stepped forward to help, thinking it was a simple act of kindness, but he had unknowingly changed his destiny. There was no turning back. The princess awoke fully the next morning. Her eyes were clearer, her movements steadier. She reached for him first, a gesture that spoke volumes. The human took her hand, careful not to startle her, feeling the subtle connection that pulsed between them. It was strange, comforting, and unsettling all at once. He realized that this bond was not temporary. It had become a part of both of them. He asked the healers about his own condition. They explained that his body had adapted to her biology, creating antibodies and life support mechanisms that were intertwined with hers. He was stronger in some ways, weaker in others, but overall stable. Yet they warned that this bond was permanent. If he were to leave, it could have unforeseen consequences for both of them. They did not know the full extent of what had been created. The human accepted the warning without complaint. He had made his choice, and now he would live with it. He focused on helping the princess regain her strength, assisting with movements, meals, and routines that the healers recommended. Each day, he noticed subtle changes in himself, reflexes sharper, thoughts clearer, emotions more intense. He felt the connection in every heartbeat, every breath. Visitors came to observe the princess's recovery. Diplomats, officials, and scientists all came to see the human who had saved a royal life. Some were curious, some skeptical, and some openly wary. Yet the princess defended him at every turn, explaining that he had acted willingly and with courage. She spoke with sincerity, and slowly, those who doubted began to accept the reality. He was no longer just a human observer. He had become essential. Despite this, there were moments of quiet tension. The human felt the subtle judgments of those who saw him as an anomaly, a variable they could not control. He ignored them as best he could, focusing on the princess. The bond between them grew stronger each day, visible not just in the medical readings, but in the small gestures they shared. A glance, a touch, a shared breath each was a thread weaving them together. One afternoon, human experienced a sudden wave of weakness. He fell to his knees, gripping the edge of the platform he had been helping the princess on. The healers rushed to his side, but he waved them off. The connection pulsed strongly in that moment, almost as if the bond itself was holding them both steady. He realized then that he could feel her strength even in his own weakness, that her life and his were not separate, but linked. The princess noticed immediately. She reached out, concern in her eyes, though her strength was still recovering. "Are you all right?" she asked through the translator. Her voice, gentle and real, anchored him in the moment. "I will be," he said, steadying himself. "As long as you are." The healers watched silently, unsure whether to intervene. They had never seen such a direct, almost empathic link between a human and an alien. It was unprecedented, and they could only record, observe, and hope. Days turned into weeks. The human adjusted to the constant presence of the bond. He learned to anticipate her needs, to feel shifts in her mood, to respond to subtle changes in her condition before they appeared on any device. The connection was more than physical. It was emotional, mental, and unspoken. They communicated without words. It became clear that neither could fully function without the other nearby. He began to understand the deeper implications. This bond meant he could not leave. It meant he was tied to her life in ways he could not undo. But he did not regret it. Every day, he saw the results. Her laughter returning, her strength growing, her confidence slowly rebuilding. He had given something vital, and it had changed both of them forever. The princess began to show subtle signs of awareness beyond her recovery. She watched him closely, learning about his habits, his preferences, even the small quirks that made him human. She asked questions about Earth, about simple things he had taken for granted, and he answered patiently. Their bond extended beyond survival. It was a connection that carried understanding and empathy. In one quiet moment, the human looked at her and realized that this was more than just a life-saving act. He had become part of her existence, and she part of his. The thought was both comforting and heavy, a reminder that choices have consequences far beyond their initial intentions. The council remained cautious, but began to see the truth. He was no longer just a human. He was a key element in the princess's survival, and by extension, the stability of the realm. Arguments about protocol and risk slowly quieted as the evidence became undeniable. The princess herself advocated for him, her voice carrying authority and sincerity. One evening, the human sat quietly near the chamber, reflecting on how far he had come. He thought of Earth, of ordinary life, of what he had given up by stepping forward. He did not feel regret, only the quiet acceptance of responsibility. He had made a choice, and now he would live with the consequences. The princess emerged from her chamber, stronger and steadier than before. She looked at him with a gentle smile. "We are not the same as before," she said softly, almost as if acknowledging the bond they shared. "No," he replied. "We are different. But that is not a bad thing." The bond between them had grown beyond what either had anticipated. It was no longer just survival. It was life shared, understanding deepened, and a connection that could not be undone. The human realized that his journey had only just begun, and that the true consequences of his choice would unfold slowly, shaping the lives of both himself and the princess in ways they could not yet see. As night fell, the two of them sat quietly, connected by more than blood. They were linked in ways that would define their future. The human understood that he had stepped forward for one life, but in doing so, he had changed both of their destinies forever. Days passed, and the bond between the human and the princess continued to grow stronger. The initial tension in the hall had faded into a careful calm. Officials observed quietly, some with awe, others with lingering doubts. The human had become an integral presence, not just medically, but in the quiet rhythms of the palace. His life had merged with hers in ways that could not be undone. The princess moved more confidently now. Her steps were deliberate, her gaze steady, and the strength in her body returning each day. She no longer needed constant support from the healers, though she still kept the human close. It was not just precaution, it was instinct. She could feel the connection they shared, subtle yet undeniable. It guided her, reassured her, and reminded her that she had survived the impossible. The human adapted as well. He felt a constant pull, a reminder that his actions had consequences far beyond his understanding. Every heartbeat, every breath was tied to hers. The bond was no longer purely physical. It was emotional and mental. He felt her moods shift, sensed her needs before she spoke, and discovered a quiet empathy that he had never experienced before. It was exhausting at times, but also profoundly grounding. The council continued to meet in hushed tones, debating the human's presence. Some still argued that he was an anomaly, a risk that could destabilize more than just the princess. Others acknowledged the undeniable truth: without him, she would have died. Slowly, acceptance grew. He was no longer just a volunteer. He had become part of the royal continuity, a living bridge between worlds. The human's quarters were modest, yet he spent little time alone. Even when permitted rest, he felt her presence. A quiet pulse in the back of his mind that reminded him of the shared responsibility they carried. He observed her routines, assisted when needed, and found ways to connect that went beyond language. A glance, a shared laugh, A gesture of understanding. It was these small moments that deepened their bond. The healers continued to monitor both of them closely. They noted improvements, subtle adaptations, and unexpected changes. His body, they observed, had undergone transformations that could not be fully explained. He possessed a resilience and sensitivity that mirrored hers in surprising ways. The connection had created something entirely new, something beyond existing science. One afternoon, as the princess practiced walking, she stumbled slightly. The human reached out instinctively, steadying her. Their hands touched, and in that moment, the bond pulsed visibly to him. He felt her strength mingle with his own, a flow of life and energy that left him breathless. It was a stark reminder that their lives were no longer separate. "Thank you," she whispered softly. He nodded. "Always." The simplicity of the words carried weight. There was no need for grand gestures or elaborate speeches. The bond itself spoke louder than any language could convey. Outside the palace, the world continued as it always had, unaware of the life-altering events that had occurred within. He thought of Earth occasionally, of the ordinary existence he had left behind. It felt distant, almost unreal, like a dream he could no longer return to. The choice he had made had bound him to another world, another life, and he accepted it quietly, without regret. The princess began to open up in small ways. She asked questions about his life, about the human world, about things he had taken for granted. He answered patiently, sharing small stories of streets, smells, and ordinary moments. She listened intently, her curiosity bridging the gap between their species. In return, he learned about her world, its customs, its history, and the weight of her responsibilities. They taught each other silently, through presence and attention. A mutual exchange that deepened the trust between them. Evenings became a time for reflection. The human often sat near the chamber, feeling the subtle pulse of life that connected him to her. He thought about the risks he had taken, the changes he had undergone, and the permanence of the bond. It was a constant reminder that his actions had consequences, far-reaching and profound. Yet there was no fear, only acceptance, and a quiet determination to remain steadfast. The palace staff grew accustomed to the unusual partnership. They observed without interference, learning to respect the connection that had formed. Some were skeptical, some awed, but all recognized the human's dedication. The princess, once isolated by illness and circumstance, now had a companion who understood her in ways few others could. The human began to notice subtle emotional shifts in himself. Moments of joy, of empathy, of shared concern were amplified by the bond. He felt her triumphs as if they were his own, her fears echoing in his chest. It was overwhelming at times, yet grounding. A reminder that life was not simply about survival, but about connection and understanding. One day, the princess asked him to join her on a walk through the palace gardens. The sunlight was filtered through tall trees, casting dappled shadows on the ground. Flowers of alien colors and shapes bloomed around them. He held her hand lightly, guiding her but allowing her independence. They walked in silence for long stretches, each step reinforcing the trust and connection that had grown between them. They spoke occasionally, quietly, about trivial matters. The humans shared stories of mundane human experiences, rains that fell in endless sheets, the taste of bread fresh from an oven, laughter that echoed through crowded streets. The princess shared fragments of her own life, memories of learning, of traditions, of a world he could not fully grasp. Each exchange was small, yet meaningful. It built layers of understanding that words alone could not achieve. The bond, however, was not without strain. The human felt moments of weakness, sudden fatigue, and waves of disorientation. The healers adjusted treatments and schedules, but they admitted that much of what he experienced was beyond their ability to control. It was part of the price for the life he had helped save, an ongoing reminder that he had chosen a path that could not be reversed. The princess recognized his struggle. She never asked him to endure more than he could, yet she leaned on him subtly, trusting that he would continue to share her burdens. There was a silent respect between them, a mutual understanding that transcended words and species. Their connection had become a language of its own, one built on shared experiences and quiet resilience. One evening, as the twin moons of her world rose over the palace, the human sat in the observation chamber. He felt her pulse, steady and strong, and reflected on the journey so far. Every risk taken, every challenge faced, had led to this moment. He had offered his life and blood, and in doing so, had become an inseparable part of another world. The princess entered quietly, her presence gentle and unobtrusive. She sat beside him, allowing the silence to stretch comfortably between them. Words were unnecessary. The bond they shared communicated everything: trust, gratitude, understanding, and a profound connection that neither could deny. The council continued to monitor them, but interference was rare now. The undeniable reality was that the human had become essential to her survival, and by extension, to the stability of the realm. Arguments faded, replaced by observation and cautious respect. As the night deepened, the human realized the permanence of his situation. He could not leave, not fully. The bond ensured that he was tied to her life in ways that went beyond simple physiology. It was a connection of essence, of shared experience, of intertwined destinies. He accepted it fully, with a quiet determination and a sense of purpose. The princess looked at him, her expression calm and thoughtful. "We are no longer the same," she said softly. "No," he replied. "We are different, stronger together." The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of truth. Their lives, once separate, were now bound in ways that could not be undone. The human understood that the future held uncertainty, but also possibility. He had chosen to step forward, to offer himself in the most profound way, and in doing so, had changed the course of two lives forever. Part 4 closed with the quiet. Understanding that the bond they shared was more than survival, it was life itself, entwined and permanent, shaping the paths of both the human and the princess in ways they were only beginning to comprehend. The bond between the human and the princess had become undeniable. Months had passed since the initial transfer, and the connection they shared had deepened in ways neither could have anticipated. He had become essential not only to her survival, but also to the stability of her world. The council had come to accept his presence, though whispers of uncertainty still lingered. Yet those were distant concerns to the two who shared a life now, woven together by blood, trust, and mutual understanding. Every day began with the quiet rhythm of their bond. He could feel the princess's heartbeat, steady and strong, even before she awoke. He would sit by her side, waiting, knowing when she stirred. She, in turn, would glance at him, a smile or a subtle gesture, signaling that she was aware of his presence. Words were often unnecessary. The connection communicated more than language could convey. The human had grown stronger in unexpected ways. His senses were sharper, his reflexes quicker, and his perception of the world had shifted subtly. Colors seemed brighter, sounds more nuanced, and even simple touches carried meaning. He had become attuned to the princess's needs and moods, able to anticipate her actions with remarkable accuracy. Yet despite these changes, he remained fundamentally human, grounded in empathy, patience, and quiet courage. The princess, now fully recovered, moved through the palace with grace and confidence. Her presence commanded attention, but she often sought the human's counsel, both through words and through the subtle cues of their bond. He guided her gently, offering advice, support, and reassurance. Their lives had become intertwined in every sense, creating a partnership that was both practical and profoundly personal. Outside the palace, the world continued its rhythm, unaware of the extraordinary connection that had formed. The human thought of Earth occasionally remembering ordinary life and familiar sights. Yet he no longer felt a sense of longing. His purpose had shifted, and he had accepted the permanence of his role. The choice he had made this step forward to offer his blood had reshaped his destiny irrevocably. Diplomats and visitors came to witness the princess's restored health. Many were curious about the human who had saved her, some skeptical, and a few openly wary of his presence. Yet each interaction reinforced the reality. He was no longer a mere observer. He had become a participant in the ongoing life of the realm, his actions having tangible consequences for all who lived within it. He continued to experience subtle changes. In his body and mind, strength and weakness alternated unpredictably, yet he adapted. He learned to navigate the ebb and flow of energy, finding a balance that allowed him to remain present, alert, and supportive. The connection with the princess remained constant, a guiding force that shaped his every decision. Even when fatigue threatened, he could draw strength from the bond, sustaining both himself and her. One morning, as they walked through the palace gardens, the princess paused to observe a cluster of alien flowers. Their petals shimmered in the sunlight, colors shifting as if responding to the environment. She turned to him, curiosity in her eyes. "Do you have anything like this on your world?" she asked through the translator. He smiled. "Not exactly like this. We have flowers, but they are simpler, more familiar. But the feeling is the same, the quiet beauty, the patience it takes to grow." She nodded thoughtfully, absorbing the explanation. In that simple exchange, they shared more than facts. They shared understanding, a bridge between worlds created not by knowledge alone, but by presence and empathy. It was a moment of ordinary life, yet profound in its intimacy. Evenings were often spent in quiet reflection. The human would sit near the princess, feeling the pulse of life that connected them. They did not always speak, yet the silence was comfortable, a shared acknowledgement of their intertwined existence. He thought about the risks he had taken, the changes he had endured, and the permanence of the bond. There was no regret, only acceptance, and a steady determination to continue fulfilling the role he had chosen. The healers continued to monitor both of them, noting improvements and unexpected developments. The bond had stabilized, yet it was clear that it was now an essential part of both their lives. The human's presence was no longer optional. It was necessary for the princess's continued well-being. He accepted this responsibility with quiet resolve, understanding that his actions had irrevocably changed the course of their lives. One afternoon, a minor incident occurred. The princess stumbled slightly on uneven ground. Instinctively, he reached for her, steadying her before she could fall. The connection pulsed between them, a tangible reminder of their shared life force. It was a small event. It had highlighted the reality. He was not merely a companion, but a part of her existence, and she, a part of his. "Are you all right?" he asked softly. She nodded, steadying herself. "I am, thanks to you." Simplicity of the exchange carried weight. Gratitude, trust, and recognition flowed through them without the need for elaborate words. Their bond communicated everything necessary. The council continued to observe from a distance, their initial doubts gradually replaced by cautious respect. They had witnessed the human's dedication, the princess's recovery, and the undeniable evidence of their connection. Arguments about risk faded, replaced by acknowledgement of an extraordinary reality that could not be ignored.